Hello, I'm Phil Little, host of the Private Investigator Experience podcast, and I'm on today with my co-host, Wade Little. Are you up there, Wade?
I am here.
Well, Wade is here, and we have a special guest on today. I'm going to introduce him and then let him talk. I've known Maurice for several years. We've worked together on some things when he was out in Vegas most of the time. And when we hear about somebody that's been successful and got some degrees and written a book and awards in their profession, we think, wow, they just had a very easy life. It was just a piece of cake. Well, I think you'll find out from Maurice's story and from many others that there's a little bit of a journey to it. And if I told all his history, we'd be here for an hour doing that. So I'm just going to touch on some things. We'll talk about his life and law enforcement, military, and private investigation. I'm going to call him Maurice. This says Mr. Hicks, but I'll just call him Maurice. I earned a master's degree in management from Johns Hopkins University and a bachelor's degree in criminology from the University of Maryland, the global campus. Maurice has been the proud owner of a private detective agency in Maryland and Nevada. For many years, he is a father of 5 children and 7 grandchildren. And I know he's got a lot probably to tell stories there. And his book, Looking for Trouble. And you won't miss this cover. And it's 500 pages of the life of a young detective, a young rookie cop, moving up through his life and how he started his life. Maurice, we've enjoyed working with you over the years, and it's good to have you on today.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure working with you as well.
Now, Maurice, in your book, you gave a very good workup of your life. Tell the audience a little bit about your upbringing. I think there was a person or two that was very important in your life, that family member that helped you. But what was it like where you grew up, and what did you experience?
Sure. I grew up, I would describe it as living under siege with a lot of violent crime, drug dealing. And one of the things that really impacted my life was when I was 11 years old, a group of drug dealers took over an abandoned garage right across the street from where I lived. And I would see them selling heroin and watch people shoot up heroin. And that really impacted me as a child. And one thing that really impacted me was I had a mentor who lived 2 doors down from me. And these individuals that took over the garages decided they were going to burglarize her home. So they burglarized her home, brought the stuff back into the abandoned garages. And a couple of hours later, my mentor came home and she asked me a critical question. She said, did you see anything? And I hesitated for a second. And I said, no. And one of the things that had me terrified was one of the individuals, when he came back from doing a burglary, he lifted up his shirt and showed me a gun. He's about a 15-year-old kid. And I remember, being petrified and feeling a sense of hopelessness. There was a code going up that you never, you don't inform anybody, you don't be a snitch, that, you and your family would be in jeopardy. So that's something that really haunted me for a long time. But I also always felt it was someone else's problem. I never thought I would be ever involved in crime fighting or anything like that. And I had no interest in law enforcement. That kind of changed. In 1979, I went with my high school classmate who wanted to join the Marines. Long story short, recruiter took interest in me, and I joined. He didn't. Same thing happened in 1983. My cousin wanted to become a Baltimore City police officer. He asked me to accompany him, so I went with him. And the recruiter took interest in me, and that's how I got involved in the police department.
I want to go back and ask you something about those early years. I was impressed, and I'd heard this about George Patton, but you put in your book a statement by General Patton: urge all of your men to pray, not in church alone, but everywhere. Pray when driving, pray when fighting, pray alone, pray with others, pray by night, pray by day, pray for the cessation of immoderate rains, for good weather, for battle. Pray for the defeat of our wicked enemies, whose banner is injustice and whose good is oppression. Pray for victory. Pray for army and pray for peace. We must march together, all for God. And boy, that's sure important right now with what's going on in the Middle East. But Tell us about when did this? I very clear that I have a biblical worldview as an investigator, and I know that you have that too. I think so. In your early years, when did this start that you knew that you had someone that was going to be there beside you when nobody else was?
Well, my grandfather, I remember he made us go to church, and I didn't really understand what was going to church because I was, like I said, at the time I was about 11 years old. So when I explained to him that I really didn't understand what was going on, he gave me an option to go to Sunday school so I could learn. My faith really started, and it really impacted me. My grandfather had a strong faith. It's amazing because he was a person who had spent most of his adult life in prison, and he decided that I was going to be his major project, that he was going to instill those values in me. And he came into my life. He helped me at a critical time in my life where I'm not sure what direction I could have went in based on the environment I was going in. So my grandfather, my greatest mentor, he instilled spiritual values in me that kept me throughout my military career and my career in the police department. I was able to fall back on my faith in very difficult circumstances.
Yeah, I found it just to work as an investigator. When I first went into investigations out of law enforcement, people said, "How can you be a Christian and be a private investigator?" I said, "Well, you just go in the front door and ask the questions. You don't have to go sneaking around and do something illegal to find out." And I found that so many times when I was in an interrogation or that I didn't know what to say, and I would just silently pray, "God, help me." And if something would pop into my mind and time again, that would be the answer and the person would break. But how have you found that as you now the Marine Corps, and so many of us have similar backgrounds, military, law enforcement, and the private sector. And so now you're this young kid headed for the Marine Corps. How did you react to that? I remember what I thought when I was a week into boot camp, and I said, "What in the world am I doing here?" Tell us about that experience and how your faith helped you during that time of being in the Marines.
Yes, I was when I went to Marines, I was really clueless. I knew nothing about military protocols or discipline. So it was a real shock for me. And I could see that they could tell that I was pretty great.
Mm.
But growing up, I had a stepfather that constantly put me down, told me I would never amount to anything. So when I went into the Marine Corps, I was determined that I was going to show him that I could be, I could be the best that I could be. So I was really clueless, but it really gave me a more sense of values as well. Taught me mental toughness. It's an experience I wouldn't trade for anything in the world. I think between my religious upbringing and my military training, I think that's really helped me to be successful in a career in law enforcement. It really impacted me. Both impacted me throughout my entire life.
Mm. How long were you in the Marines?
About 4 years.
Oh, 4. So yeah, that's the
Yes.
same. I was in the Air Force
Mm.
and made that transition back. Wade, do you have something up there you were I
I
thought maybe you were
actually, I kind of want to go back a little bit, and that's the incident with your mentor when she came and asked you about if you had seen anything, and initially you said no. Did you
Oh,
ever
yes.
go back to her and say, yes, I did?
No, no, I didn't. The interesting thing is that my grandfather picked up on that it was a change in my behavior. So he kind of took things into his own hands, and he went over and knocked on. He went over to actually the drug dealers actually moved 2 doors down not too long after that, and my grandfather went over there, knocked on the door, and with his 38, and told them that I was off limits, and that was the end of that. But no, I never told her, and that's something that really impacted me for years. And I would actually have a chance to, I guess, redeem myself in a case that I had early on in my police career. And I came to realize that there was a reason why that happened, and I was able to redeem myself based on a case that I worked early in my career as a rookie.
Right. And that's one thing I was going to ask about or mention that a lot of times things that we don't do right at some point in our lives, we can generally have a opportunity to do the right thing later on. So we learn from those things, and hopefully we learn and then we continue to do the right thing, which you did. That's great.
Mm.
Yes.
When we look at so many problems out around the world, not only in America, in our inner cities, I think I've found wherever I go that if you find people with a lack of hope, then they're susceptible to anything or any type of attraction. Someone will come along and say, "Oh, we'll get you out. We'll help you, and just go along with us." How was that for you growing up in the inner city and all the things you said you were dealing with? Was there that lack of hope, or did you have a glimmer somehow that there was a way out of this?
Well, there's a glimmer of hope because of my grandfather and also because of my Sunday school teachers. My grandfather kept instilling me that you're special, you can do great things in this world. And it takes just one person, but some people don't have anyone. I was blessed because I had my grandfather, and it was the way he described was that there were minefields out there, that he could tell me where the minefields were in advance, but it was up to me to avoid them.
Um, that's good wisdom, isn't it?
Mhm.
Because it's like today, if this generation living today, we don't take seriously our freedoms and keeping them. We can't say, well, our forefathers or our generation before us, they died, fought, and okay, so we're free. But if we don't stand up today and fight for our freedom when necessary, we'll lose it. And it's been said, all it will take is one generation to do that. But that hope, that glimmer, I think it's what you're stressing there. It's important for all this whole political spectrum of realizing how important the family structure is, how important a male influence in the home. Mothers are important, of course, but the fathers are also very important. And if we can instill that glimmer of hope, even you were living in a very difficult surroundings and situation as a young man, but you had that male image that was helping you. You can be somebody, and that's you got out of your military years, and then what was I know you tell about it in the book, and I tell you, folks, this is almost 500 pages, and it is a real journey into what it's like to be a young police officer and growing up and moving all the political issues. And that's one reason I didn't really want to stay in law enforcement and went to the private sector. I wanted to be the chief, and I knew that was going to take a long time. And I didn't like the politics. And in those days, back when I was in, we didn't have near the politics you do now. But what take us into this journey? You're out of the Marines. Now you're back. What are you going to do with your life?
Yes, like I said, kind of by accident, I joined the Baltimore Police Department, but I knew from the very first day I was going to love it because I love the physical training. I like using my mind and I love figuring out things. So from day one, I knew I would do 20 years from the first day in the academy. And one of the things that made me realize the incident where I didn't tell my mentor about the burglary, I was walking foot patrol in O'Donnell Heights high housing projects. I came across a lady who had her head down and asked what was wrong. I was just put out there on foot patrol and she told me that someone had burglarized their home. And to make a long story short, when I went to her home, they had stolen everything. I mean, when I say everything, the refrigerator ornaments off her refrigerator, her children's clothes, toys, food, the clothes off the clothing line.
Oh,
They had completely cleaned this lady's house out. And I remember asking her, why didn't she call the police? And she said, because they don't care about people down here. They don't care about us. And I looked in the eye and I said, I care.
mm.
And I would go on as a rookie, knock on a couple of doors, solved her case within 15 minutes, and got all the stuff back.
Wow.
Amen.
And that was my day of redemption. Then I realized that while I was in law enforcement, I knew it was a calling at that time.
Tell us what was the steps to once the
Sure.
lady told you, and then what did you go through to get that?
So I only had, basic academy investigative skills. So I knew to do a neighborhood canvas. And one of the things based on my experience in Baltimore and my neighbor and my mentor, I know that more than likely somebody saw it and it was probably a neighbor. So that's a lesson I learned from that. So knocked on some doors. Of course, everyone said it hadn't seen anything. I walk past a window about to do the neighborhood canvas. I look inside, and lo and behold, I still remember her red leather jacket, a wagon with one wheel missing, some refrigerator items with the sun, with there was like the sun. And I went back and grabbed her, and I said, "Look in this window and tell me whether these are your items." She said, "Oh my God, these are my items." So I eventually found out who was staying there, found her, brought her back, asked her for consent search, got a consent, got most of her items back. Some items were still missing. I developed an informant and found the rest of the stuff hidden in the woods.
Wow.
So I got my first letter of commendation. She wrote a letter to the police commissioner. And that's
Wow.
when I knew this was my calling.
Amen. And I like you're referring to scripture here in chapter 7. You've wrote Luke 6:27. But I say to you who hear, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. To one who strikes you on one cheek, offer the other one. And from one who takes away your cloak, do not withhold your tunic from them. Give to everyone who begs from you, and for one who takes away from your goods, do not demand them back, but as you wish that others would do it to you, do also to them. You not only used that scripture, but you actually became the arm of God to recover for this woman. And of course, the scripture is talking about things happen to us personally. But weaving the word of God into our lives does make a difference. And people just don't, I'm amazed why everyone doesn't get it. We have such a loving, amazing God.
Yes, I agree. And I don't know how people make it without God. I call on God in the most difficult circumstance, and He always brought me out. And that's an enormous resource. When I taught Sunday school, I've always tell my Sunday school students that, learning what you learn now, you're going to have an enormous resource. You'll have a source of strength to help you in every battle.
Well, we know that most people who don't have God in their lives, they turn to other things. They turn to other vices, whether alcohol, drugs, whatever. So they're trying to fill that void. But again, like we're saying, the fact that God is here and he's not hiding. And so we just have to answer that call that the Holy Spirit puts on us. So I have a question now in dealing with your law enforcement and looking over your bio. You're highly distinguished. You've received numerous awards and commendations during your time as a law enforcement officer. And you worked in all kinds of different departments or different areas. Can you list the different divisions or departments within the Baltimore Police Department that you worked?
Well, I worked at Baltimore, then for 2 years, then I went to Prince George's County.
Okay.
So when I was in Baltimore, I worked strictly patrol. While I was at Prince George's County, I worked in street narcotics, major narcotics, homicide, robbery. I ended up being a commander of robbery, financial crimes, carjacking, and auto theft. Also worked in the intelligence unit. I was the executive officer, and I was the special assistant to the director of public safety. And also I worked for an FBI homicide task force. I led one for 2.5 years.
Wow. So looking back over your career, is there one case that, other than the time as being a rookie and solving your first crime there, but is there something that when you look back that kind of to you marks your career in law enforcement?
Yes, without a doubt, is the case where I led the homicide task force. There was a street level drug dealer that rose to become a kingpin. I met him when I was a rookie police officer. His career took off in the drug trade while mine took off in law enforcement. So that was, I call that the capstone project of my career, because that case alone took me from patrol to major narcotics to homicide into the FBI.
Wow.
But he was suspected of, in addition to selling drugs, he was suspected of 12 murders. So that was my capstone project.
Yeah. Well, I bet that was just a crazy adventure and going through that. Wow, that's amazing.
The more we look at these things, there would be some good movies out of here. But I want to go back though. All right, you're just a young rookie. You get this immediate success. How did you find the reaction in the department to you? Whether there was, racial prejudice or not. I don't know what was going on, but more than likely there are things. How did this suddenly you come out of the gate swinging? You've got, and you're really committed. You want to do what's right. You want to respect people no matter who they are or where they're from, and you want to help them solve crimes. What was it like starting out of this, and what was the reaction to those
Yeah,
around you?
yeah. There was a lot of animosity. When I started in Baltimore, we had a 30-year retirement, so we had a lot of what we call old timers around, and some of which we referred to being retired on duty. So they didn't want to do a lot of work. So it, they were frustrated by my assertiveness, and then I caught it from not only I dealt with racism, but I also dealt with it with even with African American police officers too, because there was animosity because I was gaining, I guess, I don't know if notoriety is the correct word, but my sergeant liked me a lot. My sergeant really appreciated my enthusiasm, and that created a lot of animosity because my sergeant spoke highly of me, and I worried every day. He used to be a homicide detective and a narcotics detective, so the two things that interest me the most. So I would be calling him on midnight shift and picking his brain about how to work cases. I was learning things as a patrol officer that people probably didn't learn until they became detectives. But yes, it was a lot of animosity, a lot of frustration, because some people just didn't want to work.
We find that out in every career, don't we? People that say to the action person, "Oh, slow down! Don't do that. You're going to make us
Right.
all look bad." Well, what kept you going to you had battles, and I know reading in your book, you had real stabs in the back and people out to get you. How did you deal with all of that? How did you stay sane and say, "I'm gonna hang in here. They're not gonna run me off."
Again, I was if I had not gone into to the Marine Corps before I went to the police department, I think I'd have been really challenged. I'm not sure how I would have dealt with it. Of course, with having that foundation in Sunday school and had my grandfather, molded me. That's what really, really helped me because as you can see in the book, I always refer to my military training or my spiritual training. That is without a doubt to help me through. If I had to use if I made worldly decisions, I'm not sure I would have made good choices, but having that biblical foundation is what really helped me because I was blessed because always came out with good cases and good assignments, no matter what obstacle were thrown my way.
I was thinking about it. Maybe you have too. I've spoken to a lot of high school classes and on their work career days of thinking about what they're going to do after school, whether it was college or some kind of a job related course or class. That paragraph that you just said, if every young person could hear something like that, here's a person that succeeded and here's how I did it. And it wasn't because I was more smarter than everyone else or better educated than everyone else or had more training than everyone else. I just had these principles that I put to work in my life. And no matter what I was faced with, I lived them out. Wow. What an education for young people. And our schools today are out. No, we want you to choose today. Are you a male or female? Or no, we don't want you to know the history of really what happened in America because we want you to understand this new history that we have. America's bad, and yeah, we're not perfect, but we did a lot of good things too, though, for the world. So yeah, I'm frustrated with where education has gone. What have you found on that? Of course, you went to school probably some years ago, sooner than I have, but what have you found in this whole education thing that's going on now?
Well, I've actually taught at two different universities, and one thing that I'm really shocked about is how many students are atheists. That
Yeah.
has really, really shocked me.
I think a lot of those atheists grew up in a church as well. And then once they left the church,
Mm.
they got into that secular environment and were told that it's ridiculous.
Yes, and like I said earlier, how they cope with adversity and stress is difficult because they don't have a spiritual foundation.
Right, and you said it, I think, from what I'm hearing from now grade school, down in the grade schools, not used to be just the college. Then it got into high school. I know when my daughter went to college, that's several years ago, she's 32 now, every professor but one was anti-God, leftist, and if you didn't agree with him, you couldn't even have an opposing opinion, and they would get flunked, you know. That was, well, 15 years ago, something like that. Now it got down to the high school and then down to the grade school. What's the answer? Give me the investigative tool here. How can we straighten this thing out?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in a religious foundation. But also, one thing that really helped me growing up is I had extended family. I had aunts and uncles that also poured into me. A lot of people don't have that nowadays. I had three uncles and three aunts, and they were always pouring into me. I had my grandfather, you know. So they counteracted a lot of the negativity that was going around me. But I think a lot of people don't have that. They said we need a village to raise a family, and I think that's true. Some people don't even have a nuclear family. People not even sitting down to the dinner table with family anymore. So what are they
Right.
learning? Video games and television.
The young people, when you say the atheists, they're growing up without, not in the home, but it used to years ago, they would get, at least in the school, they would get godly principles. They would have their prayer of a school of the morning. I remember when I was, there would be a pledge of allegiance to the flag. There would be taught American and world history about our founding and our forefathers, and that our nation was formed on biblical principles. At least you would get that if you didn't get anything at home. But now, once we took that out of the schools, then the next step was to go after the family unit. And we're seeing that's happened all over the world and in history's past. I'm an optimist, but I think as I look at revelations and world and prophecies, stuff going on right now points to, we know that everybody says that are Christian, I just want Jesus to come. Well, before he does, there's going to be some rough times. And I think we're
Yes.
maybe seeing those now. But how did you wind up? Now, did you start in investigations out in Las Vegas? Or
Yes, I actually started when I retired in 2003. I moved to Las Vegas and started a detective agency and security company. And actually, that wasn't my first choice, but a friend of mine told me about another PI in Atlanta. I said, well, let me just go ahead and just try this out. And then was actually I started a training company. I was doing security training,
Mhm.
but I was trying to teach things other than law enforcement topics like leadership and diversity. But it was hard as a retired police officer because people only saw me as a police officer. So I embraced it.
Mhm.
And it was an easy sell to people because they respect the background. But as far as training, I had a master's degree, but it was hard sell because they really saw me as a police officer, not as a professional trainer.
Well,
Mhm.
you went from the inner city problems to Sin City. And
Yes.
how did you, making that transition? Obviously, I found that people I would have come to work with me out of law enforcement, even highly trained or FBI sometimes, they took this public sector approach was give me the facts. They'd give me a report with a half a page report. Yeah, they told the facts, but you need to write a 2.5 page report of all the details. So the client says, oh, is that all you're going to charge me? If you give them a half-page report, they'd say, what are you charging me? How did you make this change from what is expected in the private sector, but using the skills of your law enforcement?
Yeah, it was a big transition, and I did a lot of surveillance, particularly when I was a narcotics detective. We did it in teams.
Right.
But once you have to do one or two person surveillance, it's a whole different skill set. Let me tell you, my friend. So it was definitely a transition with the private sector, and I had to relearn some things, and I realized that I was used to telling people to do things instead of asking them. That's where
Right.
first thing that the realization. But overall, the skills served me pretty well. But like I say, it's a difference when you deal with people in the private sector.
Hey,
And I
so
remember, yes.
sorry to interrupt, but so what were some of the things that you had to relearn or retrain yourself, especially dealing with surveillance?
So instead of having a team of 4 or 5 guys, having somebody as the eyeball, you really had to, you pretty much had to, parallel people, but you couldn't just keep rotating 5 or 6 people, sometimes 10 people. You had to really know how to back off, close on them. I remember telling some of my colleagues who were still in the police department, I said, this is a whole new game that is hard because you're used to having the personnel, you know?
And
Yeah,
if you're in a 5-person or 10-person surveillance team going on, if you think you're getting burned, you could back off and somebody else comes in. Where if you're a 1 or 2 person, there's that fear factor. Wait, did I just get burned? What do I do? How do I do this now?
And exactly, we use a leapfrog type of technique. So if we're doing a major case, well, we may follow you halfway today and then pick it up the
right.
rest of the way. No big deal. But when you're getting paid by a company, they don't want you to lose them at all. We could pick it up another day because we're working for long term. So that's a big difference too.
Well, you learn to be an aggressive driver.
Yeah.
I remember we had a guy, I had 1,000 employees there. We had lots of people. The only guy I remember that could ever do a one-man surveillance, he was retired from the LA Sheriff's Office. He'd worked 17 years in narcotics and street. This guy drove the big Cadillac, a 4-door Cadillac, and this guy, he could follow one person all day, all over Los Angeles. And if this guy went across the freeway to make a fast off turn, he was on him. But that was a rarity. That wasn't my thing. I wasn't quite that aggressive with a driver, but that's the same with personal protection, bodyguard work. When you're in the government and you have a 3, 4, 5-man detail, and then you've got one, sometimes the client says, well, all I can afford is 1 or maybe 2. We have to relearn skills and learn how to avoid things. And sometimes in the private sector, people want to through this problem. Got a gun, I'll make it happen. But it doesn't usually work that way. In the private sector, what is a case that you remember that's the most that you, when you think about your work in the private sector, what comes to your mind?
Oh, a missing person case. And it's funny because the entire time with the police department, never worked a missing person case. So I had to do some research. And it was a great test of skill because the person walked away from a rehab, knew no one in Las Vegas. He was from another state, had no ID, no electronics. So it was total ground game to try to locate her. And when she left the rehab, the person she left the rehab with OD'd the same day. So I got a call from her father who hired me, and I talked to her father and mother, and the clock was ticking. And again, it's no team of investigators. It's just me running down these leads. So that case was one where I worry about this lady dying and having her parents. And there's another one. We talk about praying. I prayed to find her. And actually, I found her on Easter Sunday morning.
Wow.
And
Resurrection.
her mother emails or calls me every Easter for thanking me for finding her daughter and saving her life.
Wow.
She became, now she's just started her own business, but she became a director of a rehab center.
Man.
She got cleaned up. So that was a very interesting case that I had.
When I think about cases, I have some cases somewhere that involve people like that or situations, and they stand out more to me because of what you were able to do and help one person. And it was worth more than all the money they could have paid you. And other than the big cases you made a lot of money on. So I think that's important, that what we find out in life. Well, Maurice, we could talk for hours. And I'm so glad that I got to connect with you again and find out. I didn't know a lot of these things about you from just our work together over the years, but this is his book, Looking for Trouble. Now, you should remember that title if you can't remember the name, Maurice Hicks, but you can find out everything you want to know about being in the police department for sure. And Wade, do you have any final thoughts or questions for our guest?
Well, I think I'm going to have to go order the book now.
Well, good.
So I'm
Hey,
excited.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to
got-
read that. And but there's so much more that we could talk about, especially in the private investigator side. And maybe in the future we can do that. We could schedule a show and just talk about the investigative world, and especially working in Vegas. And now you're working in where are you at now again?
In Maryland.
Maryland. Okay, you're back in
Yes.
Maryland.
Yes.
So I'm sure that it's a different world there, as like California is to Texas or to other places. So I would definitely want to talk more with you about that and just learn more about you as well. And I think our viewers, and as we grow, this will be an episode that people will want to watch and check out. But listen, again, it was great. I remember the case that we used you on, 5 or 6 or more years ago. And we had to get some undercover stuff and some recordings and in a museum. I guess it was not a museum, but in a
Hey,
artist
Gallery.
artist
Gallery.
gallery. There we go. Yes.
Yeah.
And we got it. And our client was very happy and we got everything resolved. And so that was another satisfying and a case you worked to success. So we could speak from authority that Maurice and his team get the job done.
Well, one last question. Did you find as a private investigator, thing with ethics, everybody thinks about private investigators as sleazy. They do all these illegal things and all that. How did you deal with that? And sometimes I can find this out, but it's really illegal if I do it. How did you deal with that?
Yes, it definitely a stereotype. I remember one client asked me, her first question to me was, why you get kicked off the force?
Yeah.
But it wasn't too bad. I had a couple clients that called me. They wanted to just call it sleazy.
Right.
They wanted an unethical investigator, and I would tell them. They would tell me, "Well, I had somebody could do this." I'm, well, you're welcome to call them because I don't do anything illegal or unethical. I make them very clear.
Thinking about that, it's interesting. We get to talking, then things leap into your mind. I remember the craziest one. Well, we had a couple crazy ones, but one, I had a man come into my office in North Hollywood. He didn't want to meet with me there. He wanted to go out in the park and go for a walk. He was from Chicago, and he said he wanted to open up a gambling business there in the San Fernando Valley, North Hollywood area. And he said, well, in Chicago, when we need something, we just go in and hire a policeman and they work it out for us. So I want you to introduce me to a cop. I want to hire me a cop that'll take care of this stuff for me and clear the way. And I said, let me think about that. So we put together an undercover cop and took him down. But it's walking into a private investigator's office, but he was used to doing that in Chicago. They got away with it. But we could start telling stories all day, I think. Maurice, thank you so much for your time. God bless you. Thank you for your character. You have so much to share with young people. That message needs to get out, how they can look at you and you're not just someone saying it. You're someone who's come through it, out of it, and are living it. So God bless you and your family. You have now, what is it? 5 kids and 8 grandkids?
5 and 7, 5 kids and 7 grandkids.
7.
Yes.
Okay. Well, God bless you and a Merry Christmas to you and your family. And we'll be talking. So we'll figure out some other things to do here as time goes on. But Wade, will you take us out and let the people know how they can contact us?
Yes, I will. So we have a Gmail account that you can email us and you can contact us. And that's plipi777@gmail.com. But also, please hit subscribe, like whatever buttons are on your mode that you're listening to us or watching us on this video. We love to get you more involved. If you have any questions, if you want to talk to us about anything, please email us and we will respond. And I guess with all that, is there any last closing comments from you, Dad?
Yes, and they can also leave comments on any of the platform, but we want to just remind everybody, pray for Israel, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And as we approach this Christmas, Merry Christmas to all. And whether you're of our faith or not, we hope and God blesses you in this time of the year. So may God bless you, your family, and may God bless America.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Maurice.
Happy
Thank you.
holidays to you all.
To you
Yeah.
as well.